Good afternoon, fellow citizens. Welcome to the Citizens Chat Show. My name is Masesa Demiano, your usual show host. Just this week and just about this time, the country is all waiting for what the president will say. We are into the new term. The State of the Nation address is up to us. And today, we shall go into depth into trying to understand or try to pick out the issues that the citizens, you the citizens, would expect from this State of the Nation's address into the new term. Joined on the panel is my usual guests and my panelists, Joseph Ochieno, who's a regular. Joseph, welcome and good to see you. Yeah.
Joseph is not complete until you say Joseph of Nagongera.
Of Nagongera.
Good man.
Joseph is a leader in the UPC, Uganda People's Congress, the Congress of the People. Then we have Sarah Bireete.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, counsel and the executive director with the Center for Constitutional Governance. Then finally our guest today. Special guest. Godber Tumushabe, the associate director with the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, but he's also a farmer.
Yeah, so we have an expanded political patronage network that involves all these hundreds of MPs, 529 MPs now, with probably close to 200 or more presidential advisors. We have now 146 districts and cities. All of these have political leaders, elected political leaders. It's a huge political patronage network system that does not add any value in terms of the economy. I would say even not in terms of governance, because the work that you need, if you are in a district, probably you can even have 10 councillors do the work of local legislation. You don't need, you don't need 50 councillors in a district to legislate, because what do they legislate? So you have that problem you have to deal with. Then you have the public service. You have heard the president and the government talking about reorganizations of state institutions, which is a brilliant idea because there is a lot of overlap and a lot of institutional mandate overlap. So it would be good to see the president talking about how he expedites this process. But then I would hasten to add that in the strict legal and political sense and policy sense, the rationalization of state agencies does not solve the problem of service delivery that the regime seems to be trying to solve. Because if you are to rationalize, you would have to rationalize across the board, across the public service, but also the political service. Now you are talking about the public service, but actually the hemorrhage and the inertia is being created by the patronage in the political side, on the political side of things. So how does the president re-engineer the social, the political, and the policy agenda in this country to be able to move us out of what I would call some form of inertia, to be able to systematically move into the future where there is measurable progress? That I would really, I hope that he can think of some creative ideas, because every time these days you listen to the president, he really repeats the same things. You are lucky if he's repeating something that he said in 1986, but sometimes he even repeats the things that he said just the other day. I think that the other important element for me is...
does he repeat for emphasis? Or?
No, because you see, when you stay around for a long time, you have to have a certain level of ingenuity to be able to find new things to say. So you have to sympathize with him. Yeah, that the fact that he has been around for a long time, he has almost had the time to say everything that anybody would say.
But you're not saying the poor old guy has nothing new to offer.
No, it's different. I'm not
saying that, for 35 years, even if it were you or me,
yes,
you've said everything that you would have said or anybody would have said. but you've also said it many times, and most probably you have been on every side of each of those things. So that's the challenge of overstaying in one place at the same time. And unfortunately, when you are aging, of course, your ability to have the level of ingenuity that is required to be able to come up with new things. So it's not always
Sort of new words for the same thing.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So that's the challenge. And let me conclude by saying that I think that we have a huge problem with our security. There are two elements: really security, and then the democracy and the rule of law. In terms of security, what we have invested in is more to do with the regime security. We are not dealing with the security of the person and security of property. Because we have security agencies, we have men and women working every single day to do their job and do it with dedication and commitment. But because of the regime longevity, you have elements within the security forces that are becoming part of the problem. And the president himself has actually talked about this. When he talks about Kaukumi, that's basically what he's talking about.
The pigs.
When he talks about the pigs, I saw someone make a joke about the pigs. But these are people in the government security. When a society is stressed, people normally come up with these kinds of jokes. Comedy becomes like the biggest business in town because that's one way of adjusting to stress. So when you see people saying, "Oh, the president says pigs," and the people are saying, "Oh, yeah, he's saying people in government security," that's really part of the expression of that stress. I am hoping that the president doesn't come and start flexing muscles about how he's going to, crush all these people, because he has said it since I think the first Muslim cleric was killed around 2011 or 2012. He has basically said the same thing up to date.
But his tweets last time, he already intimated it. He said he knows them and they're going to pass on.
No, so I'm saying that
You already knows them before
this, yeah. So in this,
What does that mean?
so in this State of the Nation address, I am hoping that he actually presents it as something new to give people confidence that actually he knows what needs to be done. Then there was the whole question of democracy and the rule of law. This country is degenerating into lawlessness across the board. And I keep on telling people that societies that where lawlessness prevails, everybody is a potential victim. It doesn't matter whether you are lawful, whether you are law abiding. It doesn't matter whether you make attempts to stay out of trouble. In a society that is lawless, you will never know when the lawlessness catches up with you. And I think that's why I hope that the president can be able to summon the spirit of the nation to be able to confront the problem of lawlessness, and that means confronting his own ego about the fact that he is the only man who can fix Uganda, because that time has shown that actually he's not the only man who can fix Uganda. I think I would end with the question of regional, the geopolitics of the region. Uganda is a very unique country. For good or for worse, we occupy a very, very unique, and I think in my view, an enviable position in the region. That as a country we can be a force for good. And I think the support we've given to countries like Somalia, like South Sudan, like DRC, even Rwanda and Burundi, that's something that can be harnessed for good. But then for us to do that, we must be good players. We must be good actors. But also what we do must be institutionalized. It cannot be, it is President Ochieno or President Sarah doing this. It must be Uganda. And I think that a lot of this, the work that we've done has not been pursued in an institutionalized manner. And in a way, I think we haven't benefited immensely from the opportunities that we have created across the region. And that is mainly because of the lack of institutionalization. And I hope that the president can project a very clear geopolitical agenda for Uganda and what our role can be, and what do we do internally to organize our people and our businesses to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that are being created across the region. I think I probably in a very long submission, that's how I would, summarize what I probably would expect the president to talk about in that State of the Nation address.
Thank you very much, Godber. That was an extensive one. Maybe we need to add on that and build on that. Yes, it's a nice one. Yeah, we needed to have that broad engagement. Sarah, what would you think also should be the focus into the new term of the president?
Okay, I wish to first associate myself with the submissions of Godber and maintain them from the proximity of being near Rodon.
We just have to beg.
Yes, it comes with many advantages. Yeah, but in addition to that, I think we have a crisis of the public debt. Also building on the economy that Godber mentioned. Our public debt is now at 52.3%. It's way above of GDP. It's way above the recommended 50%. We have crossed the red line. And if you look at the talk around oil, we need to borrow much more money if we are to meet our side of the oil pipeline. But also coming with the oil is the rumored oil gas in the corridors of Parliament. The outgoing cabinet approved the resolution to amend Article 26 to remove the adequate and prompt compensation of citizens before they are deprived of their land. So we have, as much as the country should be happy, looking at oil prospects, we have a worried part of our population about to be rendered homeless by the government that is supposed to protect them and their property. It is very unfortunate to have a leadership that thinks that in order for you to do development, you need to disadvantage and deprive a section of your population. We are already borrowing money for useless things. Let's borrow money and pay people adequate and prompt compensation before they are deprived of their land, so that together we can be happy transiting into a petrol state, but not having homeless, people who are, the wretched of the earth, as you drive a particular section of the population into a petrol state. It is very unfortunate, and I hope the president will not think in such a direction. And I want to condemn the last cabinet. It attempted to amend this same provision at the beginning of their time, in 2017. They ended on a very sad and unfortunate note by bringing the same recommendation. Very, very unfortunate to have leaders of such a mindset. Away from that, we have the unemployment crisis still building into the economy. If you look at our National Development Plan 3, it has 3 proposed drivers of the economy: tourism, agriculture, and ICT. But when you look at the actions, just after adoption of that same beautiful plan by technocrats, then you have introduction of internet tax, which disadvantages people in a drive to an ICT country. Then you have things like fuel. The fuel tax affects the agricultural sector most, because in order to benefit from agriculture and the productivity, triggering productivity in a country, people must produce and transport their produce for sale. So you have a bigger burden of that fuel tax being borne by farmers in this country. And when you break down all these other taxes, they do not encourage production. And to make matters worse, we have an economy that is trying to resurrect from the impact of COVID pandemic. The economy is just trying to begin working out. We have many people whose sectors are still under lockdown. We have people in small and medium enterprises who were completely pushed out of the monetary economy by COVID. We have now a rise from 64 to 67% of people out of the money economy. So when you are hearing about fiscal policy and all these financial policies, you have a section of the population that you are not even talking about. So the first target should be to drive every Ugandan to a money economy. So that when you are talking about fiscal policy, taxes and all that domestic economic base, you are talking about Ugandans. But as of now, we are talking about a small section of Ugandans. 80% of our revenues are generated from Kampala. We have only Kampala as a middle income status. We have other 6 countries as districts as lower middle income status, including Wakiso, Mukono, Jinja, Mpigi, Masaka, and Mbarara. The rest of the districts, where we are multiplying and creating all these administrative units, are below the middle income tax. And every day we are creating administrative units, creating cities in villages. Every sub-county wants to be a city. So I hope that in this government, we can have focus. Ugandans don't need administrative units to receive services. You need effective service delivery and small functional units, a real government concept. That's a functional economy that can work in the nature of the country that we are in. Away from that, I need to also add my voice on the security. Security has 3 main components of what we can call military security. We have national security, community security, and personal security. There are also other non-military components of security, including economic security that we will discuss, environmental security, cyber security, food security, and other components. But I know President Museveni likes crediting himself for stabilizing this country. Stability for this country should not be about a few privileged, who are now also endangered. But we have a big section of Ugandans who are killed, and even there is no statement of comfort to their loved ones that are grieving. We saw what happened in the Kampala killings. And even beyond that, a whole violent election, people wanting to come to power on the blood of other citizens, that mentality needs to stop somewhere. But focusing on the current events of high-profile killings that are resurrecting again, I want to mention that the first high-profile killings under President Museveni's regime were the murder of Kaira, and then the murder of Professor Mdora, the vice chairperson of the Constitutional Commission, who was murdered because of disagreements in editing the final version of the Constitutional Reform Commission in 1993, precisely on 23rd February 1993. There was no single investigation, no single report. His family has never achieved justice. We have seen similar murders with no conclusive investigation. Many of them, citizens suspect it's inside job. Because how do you get your most VIPs killed in a manner and you are unable to produce a report? For Kaira, out of public pressure, Scotland Yard was hired and they did a good job, but the report was shelved, never made public. No action was taken. So when you look at the attempted assassination of General Katumba Wamala, and we should not discuss it in isolation, as much as it is a VIP attack, we should discuss it together with the November killings in Kampala. And all those victims need justice. We need proper action of the state. We need proper accountability of security equipment, because the bodyguard of General Katumba Wamala is on record to have said that the people who were shooting at them had a similar gun with him. So what is the status of gun control, recording, marking, and keeping in this country? And how do assassins get same sophisticated equipment like the government is using? These are questions that the president should address in his mind to as a commanding chief in this country.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think we are provoked further these engagements. Joseph, would you want to come in? You already you're on the other side of UPC. I don't know whether you agree with him.
No, UPC is not on the other side.
No, they're player. We are together.
Joseph,
We are together.
the UPC of Joseph.
There is only one UPC.
Oh, okay.
We are
And,
provoking.
There's only one Congress.
as Sarah says, I've actually just been slightly touched, taking us back, Sarah,
Yeah.
when you go to Cairo,
Yeah.
and then particularly
Yes.
to Professor
Some-
Mudol,
some- Yes.
whose families we, but particularly the context under which the whole thing happens, and then I'm just provoked that come to think of it, all of a sudden, actually I thought I had slightly much more about Dr. Keira, but not Mudola.
Yes.
In terms of this, or I am aware,
know.
but sort of had faded off my head. Now,
Yeah.
damn it, these
I was actually writing about it just 2 weeks ago.
extremely important
Yes.
points that Ugandans must wake up to into the consideration. I was going to begin my submission by an excitement in a teasing way, but it has to go to somber. And the excitement was that the land, brethren, sisters had made sure that I had nothing to say. So I don't want to let that pass. But in a way, they've actually managed to contextualize the tone of this conversation, to me in a manner in which it's very unfortunate. And yet then that say, I actually think that, and credit to their facts, figures, and specific quotations from national documents. I'm coming from a funeral service of one of the makers of the Constitution, one of the now late members of the CA. And of course this is a generation passing, and I wonder, what do these guys now say, many of them at this stage? Did they waste time? Did they waste our money? Were we told lies? What was it exactly? And what is it worth? And we in a state in which the Constitution, generally as a national Bible or document as read, gives us all the kind of guarantees and securities and protections that we would like. Godber, usually while away, Sarah always tends to remind us here about the sacrosanity of the Constitution and the formality and formats, including the details about the guarantees for not only the basic rights and freedoms of the individuals as enshrined. I do not know really what Mr. Museveni is going to do. I do not know what he's going to say. I don't know whether there is much I can expect of him in a very big way. But if only I could hope that he surprises us. For me, it would even be less about the big figures. At his stage, surely, the State of the Nation address could simply begin from just maybe 1/5 of what he attempted to do after his Bangle speakership race, where he knew, by the way, that was not for the nation, that was a little to calm down NRA. So it compelled him to come out with a very conciliatory, elder statesmanly presentation.
At that speech?
But no, I said 1%. When the guy actually comes and the guy comes and so Mr. Museveni could easily come out and do the most important thing, and that is seek to bring the nation bring together.
Yeah, addressing that social divide. Yeah.
Calm down the nation.
Climb down, actually.
Climb down the nation.
Happened about
Absolutely.
And if he actually did that, you'd be surprised how new that would be. To the extent that our citizens would have so much hope that the 10-time repeats would be neither here nor there. Say, no, I think this is a final repeat. It must be something different. So he could, I wish he could do that. He's unlikely to do it, number one. Number two, even if he did, his record is so bad that it is unlikely going to be implemented. It's unlikely going to be implemented. In terms of detail, though, I think the incidents of this week is going to definitely appear in his, unfortunately, maybe more rather authoritative, instructive speech as part of the State of the Nation about security. He's definitely going to be repeating this thing about what national stability, and the national stability for the citizens actually. You know? Yeah. You know, is it about the fact that the borders of this country are guaranteed protected, or is it that the citizens of this country?
But how
feel
are they
that the
guaranteed protected when apparently there is also arms trade on the borders?
There you go, there you go. So,
People arms trade.
but of course then they'll you're right, but they'll talk big on the question that, well, we have stability. Now, one, if it is the case that we are not threatened by Congo and we're not threatened by South Sudan, then what about the state of our own citizens, personal security, national security, and personal security and lives and properties? So many of this, I think, is usually a blackmail thing. But then number two on this, and I'm saying so because I have been having some online conversations with a couple of friends or colleagues in the last few days, where people talk about this almost as if this stability thing is a given, and forget that this country was banned by NRA guys in the first 10 years to try and secure it, and that for another 10 years we had to struggle, including people like me, who say UPC guy, whatever, trying to compel Museveni and wake up other citizens, including our supporters, that look, force and violence is unsustainable. How is it, what is it that we can do together so that we're able to have a situation in which we do not use force or violence to resolve our questions? And then you see these guys come almost grandstanding. That is a tone which I actually want to suggest that those advising Mr. Museveni should sort of desist from it, where statements are made almost as if it's a privilege for Godber to walk from here to your home, and then say, oh, we brought it for you.
You are able you talk and go home. That's what we are normally told by government propagandists. How come you talk all the things you talk and go
and you go home? So
It shouldn't be that.
It really shouldn't. But generally, that said, for me, the usual thing from UPC's perspective, really, the citizens of this country, like Obote said, the hospitals do not know religion.
or district boundaries.
National
You don't need a district.
We just
Take a hospital.
precisely. Let's provide the basic health services. Let's streamline government. Let's cut off waste. Invest in our health services. Invest in our educational system. Invest in our infrastructure. Invest in social cohesion. And out of that, this industrious nation. Godber is one of those guys I can't remember. I met him on some radio program about 14 years ago, and we're having a discussion. They're coming as the broad, sharp new guys in town. So point is, this country has got clever, innovative guys. During the preparation coming onto the studios, God was having a conversation with somebody about the possibilities of making money, wealth, and creating wealth in this country by ordinary citizens of this country. While I was leaving church on my way here, this is the citizen of Uganda from Keso, who talks about the poverty down there, and rolling out a list of ideas about possibilities of how we can not only create wealth local and generate resources locally at Kampala, but how we could spread it. He didn't even know that we come to have this conversation here.
Yeah.
So this country is possible. We just need that calmness, that peace, that leadership, that sense of direction, and the possibility in which, Sarah and I can have a conversation and know that actually we're not antagonizing Godber simply because we are having conflict in self-interest.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you very much. Now, I think we need to go deeper into, because the issue that has just come out so widely is the issue of security. And I think we need to first exhaust that. We condole with the families that have lost their loved ones from November now to, of course, the General Katumba. It's sad. May their souls rest in peace. But do you think the president could come out clear and give assurance? Do you think that is possible, or should the citizens really worry that there is no security after all? They should be on their own at this point.
Yeah, no, actually, let me put it this way, and building on the point that Joe and Sarah made, really, the point they have alluded to is the point I try to make all the time, that if there's anything that any president today needs to do, whether it's President Museveni, whether it's the new president, the most important action that that president would do is to project things that he or she can do to restore the confidence of citizens in the government. I think that's the most important thing. Forget about your building the roads and dams and bridges and whatever.
They
would
can
have-
burn in a day.
Yes, it would have to be like, what are those specific 1 or 2 or 3 things that you, as a newly elected president, you would do for the citizens to begin to believe in government, for the citizens to begin to believe that the government works for me and not against me. I think for me that's the most fundamental. And you see, as Joseph said, if the president was to come maybe even the only thing he says in that speech is say, you know guys, as a country we are hurting. Because we are hurting. Whether you are a Museveni supporter or you are not his supporter, we are all hurting. Yeah? He says, as a country we are hurting, we may have hurt each other, we may have annoyed each other, but we are Ugandans. So the biggest job I'm going to do in the next 5 years is how to see us pull together and redefine the future that works for all of us as a people. Even if he came and said that and then went down to work the following day and said, this is what I'm doing, you don't know how new he would look.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Very
He would look
fresh.
new. He
Yes.
would look new. Now, the challenge for President Museveni and also for us who work in the area of public policy is that, you know, for us, public policy analysts, we read a lot between the lines, the body language, and the words that you say. Because that's where I get the confidence to say, I know President Museveni will say this or will not say this. Now, if you listen to President Museveni from the first 2 speeches, the last 2 speeches before what was supposed to be his victory speech, yeah.
Did you ever make one?
No, you see, what was supposed to be a victory speech, he comes here then quarreling in military fatigue.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you listen to his 2 speeches before that speech, first of all, those 2 speeches, both of them he came in military fatigues, and then even what was supposed to be his victory speech is there in military fatigues, and then he's quarreling. And so from that time, actually a lot of his speeches have been about, there have been a lot of quarreling, a lot of blaming the other side, a lot of promising to crush everybody who does not believe, who does not support him. And then those are the speeches. That's what you hear from his.
And that's how you will conclude tomorrow.
Yeah, that's what I'm projecting up to, because he has been very consistent, and I see again, if you listen to him in the last couple of, like, maybe if you go backwards, every speech where he has been quarreling with himself and the citizens, these days he makes more references to NRA. He doesn't talk about UPDF.
The original,
Oh,
the real,
yes, yeah,
yeah. Was interesting, yeah.
Yes. You also need to appreciate
So
that.
I'm saying he's back. You want back?
No, he's back, because you see, yeah, he's back. You also need to understand that in his speeches, he rarely talks about government of Uganda. He talks about NRM. In fact, my reading is that in his mental programming, there is nothing like government of Uganda. There is a group called NRM, that's the government. And you see, the moment you reduce government of Uganda to NRM, it means that you can only work for NRM people.
For your supporters.
For your supporters. That's what it means automatically. And man, you can, the problem is that we don't have very, very robust think tanks here.
That's right, yeah.
Because all of us will have counted how many times has Museveni talked about NRM and not the government of Uganda. So that, and by the way, if you go back to his letters, you know, since if I recall very well, mainly since the Ruwero by-election of Brendan Kenya, he has been very, very religious in writing those missives. So he has written about complaining about how his votes are rigged, or the NRM votes are rigged. So he has written about, about the Bazuku. I remember one of the letters he wrote and say, actually he was very explicit, said, we will do things that for NRM people. Yeah? And so as a policy analyst, when you read those things from the president of the country, then you get worried about how does this president move beyond the narrow confines of his supporters to be able to think about, to serve a nation. How do you achieve that? It's quite, for me, it's very frightening when, even as Joseph said with the 1%, when we did the speakers, they did the speaker elections. Ordinarily, you would expect the president to come out and give a speech, give the population assurances about our adherence to the constitutional framework, about how we are going to build a strong and accountable parliament in the next 5 years. But it's the moment the president then reduces his remarks to casual remarks about how he maneuvered the elections to make sure Orania wins and beat the Kadag. It's very frightening. But I don't know whether Ugandans
and now you kids behave. Yes. So we're now back.
And then you then threaten MPs openly. It's a very frightening situation.
But he has threatened the parliament.
Yes, of course, that's the point. I guess the point I'm making, Sarah, is to say that the consistency means that even when he comes for the State of the Nation address, if I am projecting what he's going to say, that is going to be the posture. Because the consistency and the mental programming seems to be directed in that, direction. Finally, as a country, we have a challenge in the sense that the security, there is no accountability from the security infrastructure in this country. There is no accountability. In fact, yes, in fact, the most telling of these changes that they have done to blur the accountability is this thing called the Joint Security Team. Yeah, these days you never have the police do an operation or of the army or the intelligence. They call it the Joint Security Team. So the Joint Security Team means that the UPDF does policing work. When the operations are bungled, the UPDF says, you police, you are the one to explain.
Then they blame each other.
Yeah, then they blame each other.
When there are
leadership
abductions,
is UPDF.
when there are abductions, the police say we are not the ones.
Exactly.
We don't know what
I keep on hearing the gentleman called Fred Enanga talking about the Joint Security Team, and I read from my professional background, I read a deliberate effort to blur the lines of responsibility. It's even shocking for me that in this thing called the Joint Security Team, you even bring Uganda prisons.
Yeah.
Because Uganda prisons is an ex-post.
Yes, by the way, it's like a veterans group.
Yeah. Uganda prisons is an agency out there with business rehabilitation and managing people who have been convicted or who are in jail. But all of a sudden, you are bringing the Uganda prisons in police operations. Yeah, I don't know why we have allowed our country to be degraded to operate at that level. So, if you think about security going forward, the proliferation of militia groups, the dichotomization of security agencies. So in the police you have this group and the other one and this one. There are militia groups that have been created officially. I know that, for example, there is an effort now through legislation. The UPDF has been running fisheries enforcement operations on the lakes. But now there is a deliberate, there is a draft law that provides for the creation of a fisheries force. Yeah. So all these eventually all these become militia groups, because I know that the group in UA, the head of law, either the head of law enforcement, there are senior army officers in UA who deal with the UA enforcement. But you see, ordinarily the enforcement of wildlife legislation and fisheries legislation were supposed to be done by paramilitary forces. They are trained to deal with wildlife crime. They're not trained to deal with fighting wars and defending Uganda's borders. But the moment you start deploying military officers in UA, in the forest authority, in fisheries, then you are creating militia groups across the country. And that's because of that proliferation. I can read in the short, the medium, and the long term, I can actually read that our lawlessness is going to increase because of the proliferation of all these groups. Because remember that there are militia groups both on the government side, maybe I should not even say government, on the NRM side, and then the groups that oppose it. There are militia groups on all sides, and that is something to worry about as a country.
Okay, interesting. Sarah, just I think about this morning from yesterday, they were telling us that we invested so much on buying cameras, but they were telling us the officers who were manning that station about that time were arrested because they were not giving clear details of who and how these people moved. I don't know. So should we say that now we should worry about that investment, but also even the people themselves, yeah, the anger in the citizenry when these instances happen, especially the government people, they celebrate over this. Don't you think that we should worry about these instances, especially?
No, but how does it start? I don't think. I normally want to move away from a culture of blaming victims.
Yes. Yeah.
How
Blaming
did
victims.
the celebration of evil start in this
Mm.
country? You go kill opposition when they are participating in their governance, just because they are not on your side, and then you come and say, we have killed terrorists. You have, as a president, you are in charge of all citizens and their property.
Actually, not only the president, but also the government officials.
Yes,
They
yes, I wanted to
they
start
say-
with the commander.
Yeah.
Then when it comes to the security forces you command, the title of commanding chief of security is not a charitable title.
No.
You are accountable for all their acts and omissions. So you go, your security has killed citizens, you go and say we have eliminated criminals, we have eliminated terrorists. And these are grieving citizens. They are grieving families. Right from December, we have seen old women crying on the TV, national TV. They don't know the whereabouts of your children. The president is on record during iPod summit for having said some of the abducted people are in his backyard. He did mention that about 50 are with SFC. That was an admission that his own personal security protection unit is abducting citizens of this country. And he was aware. So when you have this background, you are killing people, there is no justice, there is no arrest on terms of excesses and breaches of the security forces you command. We saw the massacre in Arua, we saw the massacre in Kasese. Instead, citizens see you promoting murderers and killers. And that is the culture you have built. Would you then blame citizens when they also say you have also seen it? I find it difficult and problematic. You know, the social divide, the frustrations of Ugandans, the tears, the deep-seated anger is what is creating these things. So let's not look at symptoms. But I wanted also to discuss the collapse of public intelligence gathering. You have the security forces that conduct themselves like, terror groups. Because if you see what happened in November on the killings on Kampala Road, you have security in civilian clothes, some of them in sandals. People wake up and your security is shooting at homes, shooting at shops and offices. And these videos are there. And then you say, we have deployed another measure to deal with terrorists. Tomorrow from there we saw drones, numberless, abducting people countrywide. In the other day's shooting, unfortunately, attempt on Katumba Wamara, the borders had concealed number plates. They had covered them with plastic things. So citizens now see a numberless motorcycle moving. And you have been having your forces moving with the numberless vehicles. How do they gather intelligence to help you? They think it is security. And when they begin to shoot, the guns they are using are similar. Sophisticated guns for VVIP protection in this country. So how does a citizen now detect that this is a crime? I need to call police. How? Two,
an engagement between themselves.
yes. Secondly, you have created this divide of either you are with us or you belong to the axis of evil. Anybody who does not support opposition in this country, who doesn't support government, NRM, not the government. Anybody who does not support the ruling party in power is regarded as a criminal and a terrorist. How do you gather intelligence information? And then you use legitimate security whose constitutional duty is to protect everybody, to torture people who don't support you. How does now this civilian give you intelligence information? So we have a total collapse of public intelligence gathering of civil-military relations in this country. And if it's not addressed, we are headed for trouble.
Joseph, would you want to add on?
No, just very briefly that on the question of gazetting firearms, I think, Sarah, this is really part of your docket as part of the continuation of this program, Civic Space and Civic Televisions, and indeed civil society organizations in this country, to take this up as part of, in my opinion, also about constitutional reform, for us to look at whether or not it's actually possible for us to review arms, ownership of firearms in this country, because it's gone out of hand. Ironically, when these guys came, part of their argument was that they were trying to demystify, the gun. But quite clearly, we knew that it was very deliberate, and that was part of propaganda, for which they sort of succeeded globally and, in fact, locally. But it has now become a national threat. That is worrying in as far as the realities of it today are. But part of the problem is for the policy guys like Godber. At what stage do we go through these genuine political changes and guarantee that there is a transition that can be a peaceful and non-violent transition, and a transition where we do not continue losing and wasting lives and properties of our citizens? So I think something which is very serious. And if only perhaps Mr. Museveni could link this up, including in his speech, reviewing the realities of many of these other things, and simply say that, well, we want to begin having a look at this. You know, when Kanyamunyu's incident, I always get Ugandan names right, and yesterday my beautiful friend Miss Godber was telling me that she was substantially impressed by my nation-headed nation. You know that I pick in particular, all the names do it, but so I'm really sorry on this particular one. And I make absolute effort, and we should, as citizens of this country, try and do that for the purpose of our diversity. So I actually thought at that time that there would be following the public outcry, there would be a review to this process. But now that this is actually reached very, very close to home, I hope that it compels those in the security agencies and Mr. Museveni, including his own security, that these things are not a joke, they're not a walk on Kampala streets. So it should be quite clearly reviewed. But number two, I had intended again at the beginning to go on to this Katumba Wawala thing. That just like all the Ugandans as early as Cairo, and yet just as for me, I would go back to the wasted lives in Luwero, and of course we can go up to independence.
Yeah.
And of course for me, Ochieno, say that in the event that I'm president of this country, I want a National Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And that is a commission that will include serious policy guys like Godber. That will take us to the year 1900.
I have a job.
1900 to genuinely look at the building and creation of this nation state and take responsibilities up to and including the exiling of Kabaka Mutesa in 1953. That all the lives lost and wasted in this country should not only be accountable, but actually that we should remain stream the contextual realities as part of our healing process for our grandchildren. So that's very important. But linked to that is just imagine Katumba Wamala's daughter, innocent young girl, side by side with apparently next to her father.
And a very innocent driver.
Just imagine that. Coming to that. Number two, come to the driver whom we don't even talk about. We don't talk about.
Was a
Ever since
with
the
more than 20
and
independents.
possibly
Yeah.
the leader of an entire clan.
Yeah.
And we will very quickly then go ahead and focus on Katumba. I mean, with absolute respect, because actually there's a tragedy around his family.
Yeah.
But then we forget about particularly the death of his daughter and the death of the driver, and the driver who was just about doing his job.
Yes.
It is terrible. I think fellow citizens, I think this is not something that should be continued.
Okay, actually, yesterday I think on news, I was watching, I think at Better Live Fufu, and his home. And the women were really frustrated. They didn't have anything to even prepare for the guests that are around.
So why didn't you be there? Take
No,
up
there
their
was
all
nothing.
at Katumba Wamala's. What did you
There was
do?
nothing. And they even
Seriously?
went ahead to say, of course, they said, okay, at least good enough.
Was the
children
body at
survived.
home?
It wasn't at home.
Mm.
But the guests
Yes,
have
they,
come.
of course.
Yes.
They
But
said,
so at least the general is fine, but at least they should organize to send them something for the
Oh
guests who
my
are around. There was
God.
nothing really.
What are they about?
It was really sad.
That's terrible.
Really sad.
But you be there. Look, as an institution, you have lost people. So how do you go? Byekwaso is the general, Brigadier Byekwaso is come to General Katumba's home. How can the human resource personnel of UPDF fail to provide for that vulnerable family?
And I will tell you this. I will tell you this. That the other day, from the funeral services that I was relating to, the deputy speaker was supposed to attend. You didn't want to go into this, but she was due to be at the Namugongo event of 3rd of June, but she was also supposed to be with Mr. Museveni, as I understand, as reported, around General Wamala's daughter's funeral. Now you see this nonsensical thing about class politics. Read my piece on Sunday on Pan-Africanism. No, on a serious note. And it hurts, because this is not the African nations that started the struggles from about 1900, with ironically, Godber,
But how is that?
the policy guys from Africa, our diasporan Africans, who actually led our case for independence, we come with it down here, and then we waste it, and now we're spoiling it and playing around with it, to the extent that actually our leaders are forgetting and beginning to, it's actually shame on NRA. These guys who claim that the People's Army in Luwero eating people's banana, and we know, of course,
Cassava.
most of it cassava, and of course we know most of it was by force anyway. That an ordinary person like
Yes,
that goes through.
but
I'm
if you compare,
I'm quite
if you
disappointed by that.
compare with the other unfortunate incident of AIGP Kawesi, the police organized 3 delegations because there were 3 deaths.
Mm.
And set off at the same time with burial packages.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And they were shown on media.
Yeah.
The delegation came to Kawesi's home, a delegation went to the driver's home, a delegation went to the bodyguard's home at the same time. But what does this say? That UPDF is more disorganized than we think.
There you go, but it's interesting, but just to conclude in context.
Yes.
In that speech, I'll make it very brief. Mr. Museveni is reported to have been saying that they're carrying out reviews for the judiciary, and that guys, including the person who died, who was a retired judge, would be the family would be sort of like, if you like, benefiting. Now, yes, precisely. So now, if you're going through this and you're playing welfare, and here we are talking about what we're talking here, where exactly are we at? Are we picking and choosing, or is it about playing to the government?
Yeah, but I think that's where the challenge is, Joseph, because the things here we do, they are not, most of them are not institutional, because the institutions have given way to a strong man. So most of the, especially at the level at which these kinds of tragedies happen, then the strong man must be seen to dispensing magnanimity to be able to get the legitimacy that you need. Because that's basically what happens. You remember even the cases of these, the November killings, that the president has to come and give a speech and say, oh, those who were lost people, they are going to be compensated. I even don't understand why anybody would even be making a speech around that, and you are president and commander-in-chief, and yet you know that your security forces are the ones who actually eliminated most of these people. So we are dealing with what Oraro Tunu calls comprehensive brokenness. Yeah? I don't think that we should even be surprised. We actually need to sympathize with even these institutions, including the UPDF, whether the police or any of these institutions. We simply need to sympathize with them because they are operating in a political economy environment where you cannot exercise your ingenuity, your leadership, your creativity. The environment is such that you have to play certain games in order for you to actually survive around. So, the UPDF spokesperson must be seen to act in a certain way out of this situation because of what the environment demands. And in that process, then you forget that there is actually another officer of the UPDF who was caught probably in a tragedy that may not have even been
his. Not a tragedy.
Yeah. If the stories that I've read are accurate, General Katumba's daughter was working with the military hospital, I think in Hui.
Yes, in Bomb.
In Bomb. So she's also actually a defense personnel.
Yes.
Yes, she's also a defense personnel. So you are basically dealing with this. You are dealing with a team of people that may have been caught in a tragedy that was not meant for them. But then the environment is such that you have to conduct yourself because of the nature of the environment, and then so many things will go unattended. They will be unaddressed. So what we are discussing are the consequences of that brokenness. And really the challenge, and I think our charge as a country is how do we reset? Because I think we are almost at a point where if it was a computer, you have to reboot and reset.
But how many times, before, I know you want to go for a break, but how many times are we, as we were talking and the acts of the president, in my mind I got a flashback of the Mount Mahavura volcanic eruption. When Idi Amin flew a chopper there and said, get on a chopper, I rescue you. From the top of Uganda to the bottom, it is me. And we still at the same point.
let's have a short break. You've given us a laugh because we're ending on a rather emotional note. Let's have a short break and get back. Kindly subscribe. This show is running live now on our YouTube channel, on Civic Space TV, also on the Facebook TV, on Facebook, live Facebook. Kindly subscribe there. Subscribe on Civic Space TV on YouTube. And be part of these conversations every day, every Friday, every week on Fridays. Kindly be part of this conversation. Also on Twitter, go on ChatShowUg. That's where the conversations are, the hashtag. Kindly be part of this conversation. When we get back from the break, we're going to discuss more on the economy, then health, job security, and the general governance of the country into the state of the nation. We are getting into the new term. Thank you very much, and we get back shortly.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Welcome back from the short break. This is the Citizens Chat Show, and we're continuing with our conversation on what we expect from the State of the Nation address happening, from any time from now. So. Right there, we ended on a rather sad note, and we want to get back into the conversation again and try to discuss a few other issues that we think would work for us. On the panel, I have our guest today is Godber, and Sarah, then Joseph. Please follow this conversation. It's happening live on YouTube now and Facebook. But right away, let's get there. How do you think the president should address himself on the issue of the economy, especially that we are trying to recover from the shocks of the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course with the new strains that are happening today?
Yeah, so I think that the COVID impact is more of an emergency, but I would say that the Ugandan economy essentially has deep structural problems that can only have been exacerbated by COVID. So in other words, even if COVID was not there, you probably would need to be thinking of how to, what are the new ways to reinvigorate the economy, make it more inclusive, but also move away from the generalities. Because I think that the trouble with the Ugandan economy as it's structured now is that you don't see the big winners. What are the big winners? So in other words, when we were in primary school and secondary school before you were born, Demiano, we would say Uganda is the second leading producer of coffee or exporter of coffee. So in other words, coffee is big. Yeah, we probably say, we have coffee, we have tea and cotton, we are leaders. Yeah, we have copper. So, and so in terms of the economy, we say the structure of the economy is it is built around these pillars, and then everything else also is done. I think that today, while we have made a lot of progress in terms of the economy, that the GDP has expanded, the per capita income is increasing. There are a number of structural problems that we're experiencing. That one is that we don't know what we are best at. What are we good at?
As Uganda.
As Uganda. What is our...
We are sending maids.
Yes. So and those are definitely problems. I think there are times when it has been reported that the biggest source of foreign exchange is remittances from the diaspora.
Yeah.
But even then, it's not like we have been deliberate to produce a globally competitive labor force that we export to the diaspora, and therefore we say, one of our biggest exports is quality skilled labor force. Yeah. So most of these things are happening by accident. But secondly, while the per capita income has expanded, I think right now it's estimated at around $900 per capita, the economy is increasingly concentrating in the hands of the top 10%. So you may have a top, a pyramid that has a sharp top, where all this economic growth is being captured at the top, but you have a base that is wallowing in poverty. Because I think the UBOS report, the latest UBOS report suggests that about 20.4, the poverty levels are current at 24.4%. And you see, the government is going to start celebrating, because I think the poverty levels have declined from about 23% to 20.4.
Yes, now we have 8.3.
But you see, you are talking about
poverty.
Yes, but incidentally, when you go back to the statistics, you find that the absolute numbers that are living below the poverty line have not changed from around 8 million. Yeah. So the percentages will give you a good picture. They could give you a good picture that you are making progress, but actually the absolute numbers remain the same because of our population growth. Thirdly, there is always another important statistic in terms of poverty level that we don't normally mention. These are the percentage of the population that live in perpetual vulnerability. Yeah. So in other words, there is a certain percentage of the population that is vulnerable. They live in perpetual vulnerability. In other words, you are not poor, but you are living on top of a cliff. That anything can happen and you drop into poverty. So a sick child or a sick spouse or a sick family member can move certain people and households into poverty. Normally that percentage of the population incidentally previously has been put at 60%. And for me that is either 60% or 40%. And for me that is the significant number. The people who are vulnerable. So the structure of the economy, then the debt. Sarah talked about the debt earlier. I have argued time and again that it is unlikely that you can borrow yourself out of poverty. Especially when you are indisciplined as a government, the way our government is indisciplined. That you are borrowing to finance public administration. Then the money that you borrow to build roads and bridges and dams, maybe a good percentage of it ends up in corruption, building apartments and all kinds of shopping malls, and it's not going into very productive businesses. And then thirdly, I still believe that even with the discovery of oil and the potential to go into commercial oil production, I still believe that this country is going to transition out of poverty by focusing on two sectors. One, in terms of economic production, it will have to be agriculture. That the more we can invest in increasing agriculture productivity, the more we are likely to be better off. Because agriculture can be done from right household to small scale farms, to medium-sized enterprises and large-scale agriculture. So you can capture a huge percentage of the population, and because you are investing intelligibly, you are able to move a significant population out of agriculture. So, in other words, you would have to use agriculture to be able to move the population out of agriculture.
President talks of the four-acre model all the time.
No, you see, political rhetoric is different from business. Because, you know, I've been sharing with the people an experience that I have over 15 acres of coffee today. And so the other day I'm struggling to try to provide some irrigation infrastructure because the dry season is setting in now across the country. But in Ntungamo, where my farm is, the dry season is coming with a certain level of intensity that you can't imagine.
Dry winds.
Yes. So I am imagining and said, if I don't irrigate, there is a likelihood that my output will be reduced probably by over 50%. So I go and talk to the colleagues in UCDA who are helping me with the coffee and say, how do I get money to do agriculture? First of all, none of these financial mechanisms, whether microfinance support center and others, are likely to respond to you in a business-like fashion. they will process. Yeah, I was looking at microfinance support center. They need the certificate. They need the marriage certificate and the statutory declaration. If you are not married, I'm like, okay, I need money to do an irrigation infrastructure. What does this have to do with my marriage?
I also think they also do not give individuals, but they also want to be in a circle kind of.
I think they can also give individuals. But the point I'm making,
The bureaucracy.
the point I'm making is that eventually I was directed to a project which deals with micro irrigation scheme. It's an agricultural project. When I talked to the gentleman in Ntungamu and he came to my farm, basically he tells me that their project can only support, it can always support you up to 1 acre. and you know,
I can't support even a 4-acre mod.
no, you see, and I found it offensive, because you see, I'm like, okay, this is a government that is saying they want their target of coffee export is 20 million 60 kilogram bags by 2020.
But also the driver
Yes.
in the national
economy.
Is agriculture.
is agriculture.
Yes. But now they even have set a target which they have not met because they set this target around 2014. And at this moment, the president the other day said they're exporting 7 million bags. So you've fallen far behind your target. And here I am with my 15 kilograms, with my 15 acres, and the government's program is saying we can only irrigate a quarter. So you fail to understand the logic of how these governments and government people operate. So in other words, if the president cannot find the right formula of how government can invest in agriculture, in terms of providing, especially providing financing, I don't see what new that he can provide. But there's a whole problem with agriculture, just based on my experience, and maybe mine is a standalone case. Maybe other people are doing better, but I think there's a problem there. The second one.
Godber. So just finance and technical capacity. Technical capacity because you're lucky that you have all the know-how,
Yes.
minus that you're looking from the
Yes,
government.
yes.
Just imagine some other average farmers.
Oh, yeah.
Forget about actually the other 70% of the category you're talking about.
In fact, that is always my worry because me, I look at myself as an above average farmer. So I said, if I am challenged like this, then what happens to an average farmer across this country? So the second one is education. I think that any country in the world that wants to be at the frontier, that wants to be competitive, must be able to invest in education purposefully. It can't be just welfare. The idea of Bonaba Some, education for universal primary education. It has to be it actually has to be universal, compulsory, quality education. The future is going to be determined. Those who lead the future are going to be those who are educated. Countries that have a quality population is the one going to win the future.
What are the key drivers for that?
Yeah, so in other words, you just have to organize your investments to be able to deliver quality education. I don't want to find excuses of like we don't have money to build classrooms, for example. I think it's baloney. Yeah, it's baloney that you can create a parliament of 529 MPs and create municipalities spend money on administrators, and you don't have money to build classrooms. So, in other words, classrooms, you build them as a by-the-way. That's baloney for any government to think and operate that way. And it's any government, whether it's one of President Museveni or a Demiano or a Tumushabe, that's baloney. My point is that the government must be purposeful in investing, in providing a quality and rewarding education that is competitive for our nation's children. If I was in President Museveni's shoes, if I was president today, I would be putting the same level of emphasis that President Museveni puts on defense and security. Because I believe that the biggest source of insecurity is going to be the mass of unemployed and unemployable people. That is going to be our worst form, our worst source of insecurity. So if you are running government and you know that the last time I've stopped compiling my data, which I'm going to resume shortly, but I've been compiling data based on the statistical UBOS statistical abstracts. You know, UBOS basically documents the number of children who are enrolled in primary 1 and then those who sit in primary 7. And because of universal primary education, which has a no repetition policy, the assumption should be that the number of children who sit in primary 1, who register, should be sitting for primary 7. Yeah? Yeah, so I have compiled data, and for the 12 years between 1997 and 2014, there are at least 19 million children that did not reach primary 7. So they are unaccounted for. And for me, that's a nightmare. One of the most annoying things in this country, you know, from a policy perspective, is when you see about like 5 ministers of education, when the results for primary 7 are released, they sit there at the press conference and they are talking about the 600 plus students who sat for primary 7, and they never mentioned the 1 million that disappeared, that dropped out.
Yeah.
Because right now the enrollment in primary 1 is about 1.7 million children. So if at primary 7 you have about 650,000 children, it means that 1 million disappeared along the way. And it's very, very frustrating and infuriating to see.
Because there has to be accountability for each
yes,
child.
yeah. Normally in a functioning system, if by the 7th year, a million Ugandan children are missing, in the Minister of Education or whoever would actually end up resigning. Yeah. Because essentially you failed in your job to be able to deliver quality, competitive education for our children. So, but just to sum it up to say that the president, I think again, has to climb down. The things that I mentioned about, you know, that he mentions, investing in roads, building roads is good. This country should be networked. Building bridges is good. We have to be able to cross geographical spaces. Building dams is good. We have to generate power. But the software for transforming this country is with its human resource capital. Let me make just one last proposal and shut up. I think that the mode of delivery of government programs is part of the problem. Because you have ministries that operate like white elephants. So a Minister of Agriculture wants to implement programs up to my farm. The Minister of Education wants to go and build classrooms in my village. There's one which they are building. I don't know which group is building that. Kategaya Memorial Institute. Kategaya was the second in command of the NRA, NRM, RO002. And for me, I get shocked. I honest of our thinking that you allow, if you are a serious group like NRM, you allow some lock-up shops to be built and you call them Kategaya Vocational Institute. I'm like, the smallness of our thinking is just overwhelming. Seriously. Yeah? So you're looking at these, no, you're looking at these ministries.
That hasn't come from a good end.
No, you're looking at these ministries, Joseph. There are roads in our villages. There are roads in our villages. One of the roads in my village, which was really run down, I asked people, I said, but why can't you go to the district and demand that the district works on this road? And my people told me and said, no, we went to see the chairman. The chairman said the road belongs to UNRWA. That's how crazy we are as a people. So what does my village, my neighbor, What do they have to do with UNRWA? I don't think that as citizens we have no business with UNRWA and the municipality and the district. What all we need is a road.
It's a road, yeah.
It's a road, and the government must organize itself to be able to deliver on the
In an
road.
integrated way.
So-
there's on that
Yeah.
small point of roads.
Yeah.
There are schools in Kampala,
Yeah,
big schools. They have been stopped
yeah.
from doing simple roads connecting to their schools because of UNRWA and KCCA politics. And the driving factor, of course, is corruption.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
You can imagine that kind of mediocrity. Eh? That kind of mediocrity. But I've said, today, if I was president of this country, the economic development agenda would have to go regional. There must be a regional economy for Ankole, or in Teso, in Acholi. The investments must be regional. Yeah? At every year, the region must be able to tell us what are you contributing to the national output and national revenue. And they would have to be accountable. The smartest people to run the economy should not be seated in Kampala at ministry headquarters. Those smartest people must be at the regions. The engineers should be in Bunyoro building roads, making sure that the roads are built, making sure that the Bunyoro, the children have the right classrooms to be able to run. And then you are moving away from this hemorrhage that is basically driven out of Kampala. Because I think Uganda's problems right now start from Kampala. So you would have to reorganize Kampala and dismantle it and take government to the people. Instead of people competing to come and be MPs in Kampala, they should be competing to be MPs.
Mayors.
Yeah, they should be competing to be mayors. But now, man, I can tell you guys, because me, I work with the local governments, when you sit with these local government, the chairpersons, the LC5, the councillors, and you see the level of helplessness, you know, it's so painful.
Sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
What about this case where a number of districts and citizens in districts argue that some of the local district authorities are so incompetent that monies are returned to the government? So it is.
Yeah, because the money doesn't belong to you.
But meaning that they return because they don't have
fail
capacity.
capacity.
But even the budget function was re-centralized.
Yeah. So the budget function is for the cow. If you are going to do procurement, some of the procurement processes, you need authorization from the parent ministry, from the Kampala. So the delivery mechanism is so distorted that you can't figure out who is accountable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think at that point itself, I know, sir, you want to add on, but you see, we are eating into 1 month of no cabinet, and
we are feeling good.
the country is moving. Do you think that it
We
should
are
be,
feeling- how we
should be
feel.
almost a point of reflection where we say maybe on the public expenditure, where we say possibly if we resized these institutions,
We can do that, Minister.
we can do with a few of them.
I know, first of all, I think it's important for the citizens and viewers to know that President Museveni is in the day of cabinet. I was reliably informed that his list of cabinet is ready, but it is beyond the constitutional threshold, as usual. It is, so he needs his parliamentary approval. So when he was about to name his cabinet, because he's going into to address the nation as one-man cabinet, there is confusion because ministers are failed to have hand over property of government and they are illegally in office. Because they took oath for the last term of government and it ended. They have no oath, they have no delegation to use taxpayers' money and posture as ministers in this term until they are approved, vetted and sworn in. So there is confusion. Some people think they can still act as what? In what government? So we have one man.
Caretaker.
We have one man cabinet. So one man cabinet is going to release this first State of Nation address, which is supposed to give direction for 1 year, but also the term of office. Term of office and immediate things to do in this year.
So the manifesto is already
Yes,
written by a man.
so then, yeah, my sources also say that by Monday, Tuesday, then we shall have the naming of Vice President and Prime Minister, because those must be approved by the whole House. Then once we have a Prime Minister who is a leader of government business, his first motion will be to expand the cabinet to the stadium size. Again, eat up taxpayers' money and borrow money, just fund individuals who are. And we have seen that anyway, permanent secretaries are doing work. So, but away from that, you need to understand that, you know, I saw Godber on the delivery of government. In the previous years, there is no tangible connection. When you ask an ordinary citizen to say, you touch on two things where you are in connection with the government. You know, an ordinary citizen would feel government, one, by having a functional hospital. You know that when I fall sick, I will go to hospital, find a doctor, find equipment, and find medicine. Those things are rare in our community and district hospitals. Those three aspects. Doctors are just coming from a strike and nurses. Amid this COVID pandemic, for failure to pay allowances, hardship allowances approved by Parliament for nurses working during COVID. Money has disappeared. So this is the kind of health care that we have seen in the last 35 years. Another connection by an ordinary person to government would be education. Knowing that I have a child that is a government school and my child will study. It does not exist. When you go to allocations of UP, I don't know what it is in this budget, but in the last budget it has been 7,000 for a whole year. Then you go to a stadium and say, I am educating children of this nation. 7,000 that cannot even buy lunch. And you are allocating that for 1 year, and you are telling people that you are educating children. So another connection would be security. The first years of local council systems, LCs, at first they were RCs. There was a connection. You would know you need, if you are a new person on the village, you need to go to the chairman so that tomorrow when you have a problem, and the local council courts were also more functional, a bit, when they were first introduced in 1996. But with time, if you build your house or even you shift on in an apartment, there is no use of wasting time looking for a chairman. Because what service is he going to offer you with? Is there a connection? As you stay in the house, while you are staying, what is the connection with your chairman? The communities are trying to organize themselves using WhatsApp groups, and they are doing self-help governance at that community level, including provision of security. Where we are staying, it is us providing security, including when people are attacked. It is you people to wake up and rescue. So what is the presence of government in the lives of an ordinary citizen? So the whole manner and architecture of government, you know, as Godber was talking about regional development, when you look at, I know people like bashing colonialists, I don't know how they come in and who was responsible. But when they were here, when they did the Kasese Road, it was clear that the Kasese Road network and the railway was for collecting copper. So the infrastructure development was connected with productivity. And they would enforce that productivity. You know that in Usoga they are growing cotton. Then you also have agriculture extension services and agriculture demonstration farms that are equipped with cotton, what is needed for a farmer to know cotton and the troubles God was talking about of trying to get services for irrigation. So the agriculture demonstration farms would have skilled labor, would have inputs, agricultural inputs, would also come and test your soil and advise you on what to plant according to the topography of your soil. That is what now people are talking about as if it's rocket science. Under partition mode, we shall test your soil. It was done a long time ago and destroyed by this regime. Yes.
Okay, interestingly, you realize every region is special in its own way.
Yes.
They produce enough.
That was a creation of the colonialists, the first of the government. that productivity. Next to that was the cooperative
Sarah,
movement.
again with your primary education,
Eh,
we would say, you know,
Each region.
cotton growing in Lango,
Yes.
tobacco growing in West Nile,
Exactly.
You know,
It was part of our geography. I don't know what people studied now.
cattle rearing in Teso. So we knew the economies of the region.
Yes.
But all these economies have, they have been destroyed without any replacement.
Yes.
And the destruction has been.
And now they are making a discovery.
It's like they are making a discovery.
Of what should.
Yeah, so the destruction has been either systematic, so like the destruction of the cattle economy in Teso,
Yes.
which was really through a lot of cattle raiding and appropriation. The cotton ginning in Lango, you know, you no longer have the real that prosperity of
And Nogongera.
and Nagongera. Yeah, so in other words, that's why I'm saying that I think that at the end of the day, these regions must be economies. In fact, for me, the regions must be the economic pillars of the country.
Yes.
Yeah?
They are. And to drive productivity.
They drive productivity, they compete, they are rewarded for producing output. In other words, if I have Teso and Teso is producing more milk and they're adding more liters of milk to our economy, we should invest more in Teso. I don't want to be just sending money. Send money to Kamuri and Chirugura and whatever. No, I need to know what are you adding to national output.
I think that's why
Yes, but to conclude on that, this productivity then had a ready market through the cooperative
Yeah.
movement. Cooperative movement was politically destroyed in this country. The only surviving movement is in Bugisu.
Yeah.
And when you go and study, I have taken time to study the Bugisu cooperative movement model. They get seedlings, they also have extension services, and then they guide, they consistently educate
The
the
cooperative
farmer.
the cooperative does quality assurance.
Quality assurance, collection centers, and then marketing. So once you don't have, now people are struggling on their own to find the market. There is no market like was there by the cooperative movement. So all that architecture to make sure a citizen is productive in this country does not exist. Go back to ICT, driving ICT to create jobs for young people. Facebook is closed in Uganda. Facebook is illegal.
And it's
All
closed,
the
and
businesses-
it's closed because of politics.
It closed, yes, it closed because people who belong to the ruling party violated the terms and conditions of Facebook.
But I see police posting information.
Yes, I know. They are under
Police didn't,
VPN.
they're using VPN.
They are using
Which is illegal.
yes,
Illegally.
they are acting illegally. Many businesses where people were trading on Facebook. It is a trading program. People, they are influencers on Facebook. People earning a living. Because if you are talking of ICT and digitalization, creating jobs, what jobs are you creating? With these platforms that you want to man in Stone Age era, kind of mindset. So these are the challenges that we are faced with as a country. And I don't know. There is a proposal under the new manifesto to introduce e-government. But when you are a 35-year-old regime introducing e-government, as much as it sounds exciting, also I think viewers need to know that as you do e-government, it is the human beings who feed information in the system. So once you have these rotten human beings fitting into the system, but also it's like educating now my grandmother on how to use WhatsApp. This is how this government is going to move on snail speed in that e-government era.
Joseph, maybe you will want to build on
By
Sarah,
the time-
but before that,
By the time they catch up, we have changed from e-government.
because we have rampant loans that are being go to everywhere. Do you think the president would come out to address himself on issues of accountability for these loans and when to repay them?
You can never do that. You send a thief to chase a thief, or send a thief to audit. And what do you do? No, he will not talk about it. Actually, honestly, he will not talk about it. he may talk about the broader figures, and he may make it sound so big, bigger than the one that Godber would use as a big policy thing, claiming that, well, this is how well we're doing, and this is how much we're borrowing to go ahead and rescue and secure your future. So that's really all that he can say. But so quite clearly, I'm not quite sure whether I can waste my moments of hope on that. The only thing that I can go back slightly to is that I think what both Sarah and Godber were talking about, you know, the cooperative movement. Godber, for me, I saw when Damien hadn't been born.
Many years ago.
Every time it hits Christmas, the time for cotton harvest, I remember how the lorries would roar over our hill. And come home. And
No, I'm coming to Nagonga, definitely.
roar, you know, busy, you know, busy, taking to the stores and busy, taking to the Nagonga refinery, you know, to do the oil and the process and take it to nitro ginger and take it to ATM Valley to produce our powerful fabrics. These are Marks and Spencers, and these are and we were taking this stuff to the UK and Americas, and I've written about this before. The guys people from where the other cotton factory in Valley is, most of them, including some who are slightly older than them, don't know what ATM means, meaning after textile mill Valley at the time, because they think this machine thing. That's been destroyed. But what was happening? You would feel, I still remember, Sarah, you feel that there is something roaring. The country is running.
Yes, exactly.
Engines are rolling. The bus from Nagonga to Tororo to Busolo via Nagonga is going. The train from Entebbe from Nairobi to Kampala, extending extending eventually then to Pakwach, eventually Soroti, to Kasese was going. That is in my Nagonga. You feel this is a country. I was a young little kid. Each and every aspect of that was about our economy, was about our society, was about our community. Guess what? That December for cotton, people got rich. That's when you see the new shillings manufactured rolling. That is when families are mobilized and organized. That's when the school fees for the entire year. And yet remember, the school fees was minimum because the government was paying, and government was preparing us for universal primary education.
And sending textbooks
and
and exercise
everything else. By the way, I was a class prefect in primary 1 on day 1. From that day until I left primary school, I was lucky every class, including the two I jumped, you know, I was responsible as a class manager. But imagine primary 1.
When you want to contest for president, we'll ask you to account for the two.
And by the time, that would be the best year. That would be the best year.
I'm imagining NRM basically shooting a case and
can you imagine? And for them, they were very unlucky. Because for me and Museveni and some of these guys, one of the things actually that I say, but I don't know what to push into it, but actually it's interesting. Sir, I was so clever in primary school, the early parts of primary school especially, that primary 1, the first 3 or so years of my education, you complete an exercise book and you say how many were complete for maths or English or writing, for which there is no cross, rather than how many crosses you get in one week or something like that. That was so good. But why that is important is this, that the class prefect, class monitor has a book, we are the ones who gave exercise books
to the class,
and pens,
and textbooks.
And textbooks. Damn it, everything you've lost.
Sorry, man.
The teachers didn't know how to bother. That is the
And the parents.
And that's the event that happened. After including an early part of Idi Amin's time, as a matter of fact, because the 70s were born.
Even Opata too. I was in primary 4 when President Museveni came to power. When they were taking over government, the books were disrupted. So immediately they took over government, the books came. The deliveries the shipments were able to be made. So they took it as their achievement. Immediately, even before they took over government, we got books. So it happened even in the...
That's correct, but I was emphasizing, to talk about And why I call it the early part? Because the latter part of Amin was when the economy started struggling
Yes.
and being actually sabotaged by actually us who were fighting. I mean, including us nationalists, UPs and everything, including Museveni, fair enough. But then with the US guys who were putting sanctions on Uganda and then pouring monies in Kenya so that coffee started getting smuggled into Kenya. This is still a relevant part of the discussion around the economy. But taking you back, come election times. Now, in the morning, in my home in Nagonga, you wake up and you, ooh, 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 ooh. 6 o'clock in the morning, LBUs marching. You realize Nagonga has turned into a war zone. Every morning, yes, every morning. But no, you don't usually during elections. This has been happening now twice. You know, in the early mornings, that's what you hear.
Yes.
And it is generally, it's actually psychologically traumatizing, you know, and irritating. But what is it? The whole place is quiet. And I'm talking about Nagonga, which is a relatively better off part of Padola. Go 6 miles deep. And then you realize the suggestions that my colleagues were talking about. It's extraordinary. So we've had the cottons, which today's population thinks is impossible. We've had the coffees, which today's population thinks is impossible. We've had the beans, we've had the agricultural officers. My in-law, my brother-in-law, my eldest sister's husband was the sub-county agricultural officer.
Yes,
These guys
and the most powerful
motorbikes.
minister was the minister for cooperatives.
You see? So
But
Who's
now
the
it's
most powerful?
settled.
Security.
Which minister? Who is the minister for security? Do you know him?
these days.
It's powerful.
No.
Being shouting on TV doesn't make you powerful. The power is determined by what decisions you can make.
So is the powerful people now?
The president.
And his family.
Yeah? Yeah. He's
Sorry.
The conclusion there.
So really, what I was saying was, you know, you feel at a particular community, wherever you are, something's happening around you, economically, politically, socially, and in health-wise, as I say,
Yes.
you know, so everything happened.
Yeah,
But
hospitals were
functioning. Dispensaries, as I said, Nagonga dispensary, the ambulance driver used to be my mother's friend, my wife used to be my
They
mother's
had an
friend. So
ambulance.
yes, they had,
Dispensary.
yeah, they used to come and park in our home when
A
everything is
minister
quiet.
was shot and had to move on a boat. Steady progress.
I was not going to go to that.
Okay, but
So then really, you know, RailNet trains, you know, passenger and goods trains worked. Today we talk about the transport system, and it's amazing. The Busoga line, and then you might have some kind of interest here. The Busoga line, which was taken from Jinja to go to the upper side towards Kamuli and come back to Busembatia for Ugandans and the map of our country, or particularly young citizens, we need to get the map of our country very well. You know, it was primarily to penetrate, not to provide transport, but yes, to come and make it work. When Water came back in 1980, I think we told this problem, but I'll say it very quickly. Apparently the delegation from Uganda, UPC delegation from Uganda, went to see him. So they asked him, what do we do? I'll cut it short. What do we do? You know, going back. They said, no, but thank people of Uganda of what they went through and staying with us and the sufferings and everything else. But you know what? You tell them we were with them and we were to them. What we will do? Tell them to go into production, to use one, to go into production. You know, double effort in coffee, double effort in cotton, and their livestock, you know, those are the guys in the category that side, and grow everything. We shall buy them, we shall store them, we shall give them good prices, meaning fair prices, you know, and we shall guarantee security for them. Now, this one, the political thing that I got, the argument from this Ugandan government, one of the members actually, late Kasiri Manji told me this, it was that they expected the body to tell them, find a way of how to rig, of course, find a way how to rig. You go some kind of PG, make sure that kind of Haji, buy him like this. He did not give them an answer because he knew Uganda was not his political base. Important point, Godber. You know, but Uganda is the heart of the Republic of Uganda.
Course, yes.
These guys have come. What do we want? We need them to do that.
build
And as a
it.
government,
Build
this
it.
is what we're going to do. That is part of what God was saying.
Yeah.
That is partly what Sarah is saying. So this country really is possible. It just needs the driver, drives the leadership.
I think we're almost tending to the conclusion. I would want to bring it to Godber first as part of your parting shots. How best can we, or can which critical areas can the president look at and say, okay, these are the best that we can realign in the budget, and we ensure that Uganda is the forward trajectory?
As I said, this country is not just about the budget. The budget has no problem. In other words, if you have the right government, you have the money, you can organize the budget even overnight.
Yes, right.
Yeah. So in other words, this country is yearning for leadership. Yeah. You need the president that we have now needs to lead. I have this sense that the president is not leading, because the leadership would be shown in what posture he gives to the country. Presidents help, presidents are aspirational. They create a situation where the population begins to imagine that the impossible is possible.
And get a compass.
Yeah, that's
They should allow citizens to feel.
yeah, that's what you want in a president, in a leadership. I think I should mention that Sarah talked about you need a resolution to expand the cabinet. I have been arguing and said, this country where it is, the inertia that the regime has created, you need to take actions that cause some kind of shock therapy. Yeah? You need to take actions that make the population feel like, no, it's no longer business as usual. You don't just go out there and talk and say things are going to be different. No. You show it in action, and the population feels like, okay, these guys are up to something good.
Yeah.
Things are changing.
Yeah.
And the first action for a president, any president, the first action to say the next 5 years are going to be different is dependent on the team. Because cabinet is the government in operational terms.
Yeah.
When we say government, we are talking about the president and his deputy. We're talking about the prime minister and the cabinet ministers. So the quality of that government is what tells you these guys are serious business. So I would want President Museveni to shock us, yeah, and say these 5 years are going to be different. 21 cabinet ministers.
Professionals.
Yes, they have to be professionals. I mean, I have no problem because we
I saw hints about you.
Yeah.
And we would celebrate. We would say, yes, okay.
It's basically, it's just not possible. I think it's blackmail. No, but the point is, the point is that they are senior citizens that have served in this government.
No, I know.
Yeah? They are senior people. They have made their contribution.
Very nice people indeed.
Yeah, they have made their contribution. But I don't think that they are the future. Yeah? They are the past and the present, but they are not the future. Now, I have no problem. As a country, we need to make sure that they are comfortable. We need to look after them.
We respect them.
We respect
And
them.
they've done great work.
We allow them to retire peacefully and in a dignified manner. I don't want them to be abandoned, but they need to move on. Yeah? And the president, of course the president would have been the one retiring. But now that he's our president.
He would have been amongst them. But,
Because you see, I keep on telling people, when I criticize what Museveni is doing and how he's running government, they say, oh, you don't like Museveni. I said, no.
It's not possible.
The reason we criticize him is not because we don't like him.
As an individual,
Yeah,
because he's a
no,
president.
we criticize him because he's president. Today, if it was Joseph Ochieno, president, and you are doing the same thing, man, I would direct fire at you in a manner that you cannot believe.
and you and me.
Yeah, and you and me. So in other words, I keep on telling people that President Museveni, Joe may not agree with this, but I say President Museveni has been a good leader, but he is past prime
For
time.
these purposes, I agree with you.
Yes,
Let him take it. And shock us.
He's past prime time. So I would
Next 5 years.
I want him to shock us and get a team of smart men and women that say, this is your charge. This country is going to transform or we will lay the foundation for transformation for the next 5 years. We want to do business as usual, because business as usual is not what we are going to do for. So I really want the president to shock us. If he doesn't, my expectation is that he won't. So in other words, I would also be shocked that he has shocked us. Because I don't expect that he will. But essentially, when he delivers his State of the Nation address, I wish he could read a different speech. I don't want him to tell us about from the days of the Batembuzi. No, we are not there. Yeah? Guys are going to the moon. Guys are going to the moon. Research is being done on the Antarctic and the Arctic. And business is being done online on Amazon, on Alibaba and whatever. You can't tell us about the days of the Batembuzi. This is how you used to do things. So let's challenge the president and say, man, 35 years down the road, you have 5 years which are contested. You just have to do things that could get legitimacy for your government. You just need to reach out and be able to mobilize and organize the population. And as I said, you just need to do actions that restore the confidence of citizens in government, because the trust of citizens in government is totally broken. It's really degraded to a level that the cost of doing business of government becomes expensive. Because when citizens do not trust you, they are suspicious of any action that you are going to do, even when it is good and legitimate action. Yes. And the president needs to understand that. I don't know what his advisors tell him, but I know that you can cut down the cost of doing business by making sure that citizens trust that every action you are doing it on their behalf and in their interest. Right now, we know that the president and his group, the NRM, they do things just for themselves and their interest, and all of us are just objects in their entire ball game. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Godber. Thank you for that extensive parting shot. Sarah, your conclusion and the parting shot in there.
Well, Demian, a State of Nation address is about social, political, and economic accountability. So I expect really the president to, and it can even be 5 pages. He doesn't have to read it for a whole day. Even his energies, the natural factors. He's frail at 76.
We care about him.
Yes. So he needs. That address that address can be concluded in 1 or 2 hours. It doesn't have to be the whole day.
He speaks for an hour.
Yes, no, yeah. But so at times people see it 4 o'clock, 5, and then you look at the tangible things, because it is about 3 things. What is your accountability to the nation? What are you planning to do in the 5 years? And what is your immediate 1-year plan?
And what is the future? How does the future look like?
Project the future and move with the citizens. So it can even be 3 pages. 1 page is our accountability is here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 have been achieved. Number 2, this is a projection for our 5 years, and this is the 1-year plan, immediate plan, and maybe my 100 days. Things that African leaders don't do. But I hope that Civic Space TV will reconvene us to discuss the first 100 days of this time.
Definitely.
And then, most importantly, within 3 months, Parliament was sworn in and it started work this week. The Minister of Finance, whoever it will be, is mandated to produce a fiscal responsibility charter. This government, the previous 35 years of President Museveni are characterized by fiscal indiscipline. We hope that we can have a meaningful fiscal responsibility charter by 21st August, presented by the Minister of Finance, whoever it will be. And I hope that it will speak to the expectations of the citizens. I think it's also important to note that no matter we sit here and discuss these fiscal things, but 64% of Ugandans are not part of this economy of Museveni that we discuss. So we need to see efforts of inclusion, economic inclusion in that state of national address and settlement of the citizens. All lives matter in this country. I know that we have been condoning with the family of Katumba Wamala to the extent that some people have even forgotten the family of the driver. Unfortunately, the mourners by last night at the family of Katumba Wamala's driver had no food
Shocking.
to eat.
Yeah.
Very sad, very saddening that the human resource function in the Ministry of Health does not have the aspect of Ubuntu and thinks that proudly
Minister of Defense.
Minister of Defense and UPDF, and they think that they should not proud at Katumba Wamala's family and think that the family of his driver is not important and does not matter. Very unfortunate, and I condemn that. All lives of Ugandans matter, all Ugandans are important. Let's cherish humanity, let's protect everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. Joseph.
I just completely associate myself with the last observation made by Sarah, and all of us shared this during break. And it's very saddening that actually the experience is there and is actually confirmed by a video. I think it's something that needs to be reviewed and acted upon urgently. And for me, as Joseph Ochieno, I insist that it should never, ever happen again. And it's really a shame on any senior officer that something like this happens and that we let our citizens, particularly the guys who struggle the hardest, taking bullets on our behalf, sometimes sleeping outside our gates and eating junk,
And we dehumanize them in their
and we
deaths.
dehumanize them in their deaths under such a situation. I think people are unacceptable. But that said, Mr. Museveni could do just a little. Surprise us with some humility. Grant us and grant this country the compass in terms of a new direction. Mr. Museveni has a right to actually say that he's going to be 40 years. 40 years is such a privilege to be in the #1 citizen of a country.
Uninterrupted.
Uninterrupted. It's such, that is 10 times the terms of a president of America. Jimmy Carter was a one-term president. Sarah and Godber, you both know, he is one of the most celebrated, revered American, in fact, global citizens living today. He served only one term, 4 years, and impacted the world so much and continues to do so. So there's some food for thought for Mr. Museveni there. But that said, I think everything else has been said quickly. I really hope that the ordinary citizens can actually in the next 5 years expect to receive medicine promptly and basic medicine and their health facilities, that children can be guaranteed basic education that schools and academic institutions, as God was suggested, begin to improve because we know that's at a very low aid. But 2, 3, that actually our citizens, particularly women, who suffer domestic violence both here in town and in rural places, who go to police stations, make reports, and they're treated as criminals by police officers. I hope that maybe our law enforcement officers, in this case the police, as part of the mainstreaming of this, including equipping of the police forces, that these are things that can be looked into and we see some kind of changes taking place over the next few years. I know we've spent a long time. I want to cut it short. You realize that I'm not going to the big side, but I'm simply saying if, for instance, just those 3 areas are impacted in the most rural parts of our country, then I think we'll be going somewhere. But one thing for certain I know, this country's been, this country's today, this country's possible, it has a future. The majority of these countries are young people. We just need to make sure that we grant them the possibility that the future is real. The kind of future that Godber and I just about tested some little bit. It's only just a little bit of a scratch. Some of us tested slightly more.
I received those books.
Going forward.
You arrived with
And
the
they were so
junta.
big.
Sarah arrived with the junta.
I
So anyway, Godber tasted the best of the past. May Godber's grandchildren and Demiano's children taste the possibilities and the better possibilities for the future.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joseph. That's a very nice conclusion. And also, may you all enjoy the future of Uganda, where we all would be very comfortable and feel that It's part of us. Thank you very much, dear citizens, for being part of this conversation and this episode. This has been the 14th episode. Thank you very much for always following and sharing your comments and your reviews and everything that we keep benchmarking on and also trying to learn from. Thank you very much for being there on our Citizens Chat Show spaces, also on the YouTube, Civic Space TV. Kindly subscribe. Yeah, go there, subscribe on the channel, be part of the conversation. Thank you very much, Joseph, for being here. Thank you very much, Sarah, for always being part of the show as my regular panelist. And our guest of today, Godber, thank you very much for sparing your time and joining the citizens of Uganda. Thank you very much, and we meet next Friday.